I'm Isaac Keith Martinez, and welcome to Isaac's Haunted Beard. Hey, you know what? A lot of people hate remakes of horror films. I don't hate remakes of horror films. I just hate bad horror films. And to prove that, I'd like to talk about 5 horror films that are remakes that don't suck. Now, the 5 movies that I picked do not mean that I think they are better than the original. I just think that they are entertaining horror films. In fact, as far as I'm concerned, as the audience, the only responsibility that this movie has to me is to not bore me. In fact, to entertain me, to remind me why I love horror films. Now, like a lot of you, I'm very precious about horror films, and I can see why remaking original horror films is upsetting. But if done right, I think it's not necessarily a bad thing. My theory with remakes is that you ever sit around the campfire when you were a kid and you had someone tell you a story, like an old ghost story, and let's say somebody else told you that same story like at a slumber party, but then that second person got the same gist of the story, but it was kind of different. That's how I feel about horror films. If you were to think of horror movies as modern day folklore, different people would tell that tale differently, especially years later. So here are 5 horror remakes that I think are pretty cool. So the first one is the Amityville Horror. Now, I don't think this is a great film, but I included it simply because I think it's not boring. Now, I'm going to say something that might upset some of you, and that's not my intention. I'm not a huge fan of the original Amityville Horror. I think it's kind of boring. I think it has a great setup, and I think leading up to this idea that some magnificent haunting is going to happen, it never really happens. There's no payoff. At least with this film, you actually see more ghost. My only complaint about this film is actually not really a complaint, it's more of an observation. And it's not for the reason that you're going to think that I'm picking on it. Ryan Reynolds is in this film. And Ryan Reynolds has this scene where he has his shirt off and he's chopping wood. And Ryan Reynolds is ridiculously cut. He looks like a professional wrestler. His muscles are just glistening, okay? Now, this is not meant to be like a love letter to Ryan Reynolds. My point is this. You can't have, and I'm getting a little nitpicky, and I understand that, hey, it's a horror movie. It's not supposed to be scientifically accurate. But to have a body like that, it should be part of your character that you go to the gym all the time. And he doesn't. He's just a dad. So, I don't get it. Why do you look that ripped? Okay, the Amityville Horror. Kind of fun. The next one is The Hills Have Eyes. Okay, this is a remake of the Wes Craven film from the 70s. Wes Craven made 2 classic horror films in the 70s. The Hills Have Eyes and The Last House on the Left. Both have been remade. The Last House on the Left remake, I don't really like. I think that the original is much more intense. Although I like the original Hills Have Eyes, I actually find the remake to be way more intense. I just find the original to be a good idea, but it hasn't aged that well. I think it's kind of slow. This one is raw. It is just an intense experience. You really, really get a wild time with this film. The Hills Have Eyes. I think it's terrific. Alright, next we have Dawn of the Dead. Okay, the next 3 films that I'm going to mention, this is one of them, are 3 films that I think people got really upset when they found they're being remade because people are so protective of the legacies of these films that people were just ready to hate them. And this is one of them. And what happened when this came out, we were all surprised by how good it was. It was great. Whether or not you like this one better than the other one, or the other one better than this one, it doesn't matter, they're both good. I'd like to point out 2 things about this one. One is, I love the opening credits with the Johnny Cash song and all the news footage of just the world going to hell. what a great, just quick 2 or 3 minute explanation of, hey, zombies are taking over. I love that. And the other thing I want to mention about Dawn of the Dead is the running zombies. I like slow zombies, but I also like the intense running zombies. But I do want to dispel something. This is not the first movie to introduce running zombies. If you remember, or maybe you have not seen it, in Return of the Living Dead in the 80s, those zombies run. And in Umberto Lenzi's film Nightmare City, which is arguably a zombie film, those guys run too. So I kind of think of that as a zombie film. Alright, the next one is one of the other ones that people were really terrified when they found out they were going to remake this, and that's the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. With this one, I think what was so wonderful about this was how surprising it was a great film. It didn't try to retell the same story, and it had a totally unique style that film director Marcus Nispel, who was formerly a music video director, brought to the movie. It really looks cool. And one of the things about all of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre films that have in common is that Leatherface is the main bad guy, but he's a part of a family of cannibals. And there's always one family member that really kind of outshines the rest of them by being very vocal and verbal. In the second one, it was Bill Moseley. In the third one, it was Viggo Mortensen. In the fourth one, it was Matthew McConaughey. In this one, it's R. Lee Ermey, who is so terrific that this is his second greatest, in my opinion, performance in his entire career. His best being Full Metal Jacket. So the Texas Chainsaw Massacre is awesome. I love it. Finally, this is going to be the one that's going to really pee you guys off. I love Rob Zombie's Halloween. I know that everyone loves John Carpenter's Halloween. I do too. And I know I got a lot of haters for this film, but I love this film. I think this film is told very well in 3 acts. Act 1, Michael Myers as a child. You only get 7 minutes of that in John Carpenter's film with no explanation of why he kills his sister, and you really get a lot of background of why this kid is a loon. And then you get Act 2, Michael Myers in the insane asylum as a kid aging into a man, becoming the hulking monster that he is. And then you have the escape, and then you have Act 3, where he is loose, and Michael Myers is back in Haddonfield, and he's slashing his way through horny teens. I love how vicious this version is. I think it's very cinematic, and I love his mask. I think it's one of my favorite versions of the shape. I love how cracked and aged it looks with the unkept hair. I love Rob Zombie's Halloween. So there you go, 5 horror remakes that don't suck. Hey, subscribe to Isaac's Haunted Beard on YouTube, subscribe to isaacsHauntedBeard.blogspot.com, and follow Isaac's Haunted Beard on Twitter at Isaac'sHauntedB. Thanks for spending time with me. Bye.